Hello and welcome to today's NEASC Forum presentation, Why Advisory is Essential to Student Success. My name is George Edwards. I'm the Chief Accreditation Officer at the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. I will be one of two moderators for today's forum.
And I am Jeff Rodman, the Executive Director of NELMS, the New England League of Middle Schools. We are so happy to have this chance to collaborate on today's webinar and bring this important topic to such a wide audience. For more than 45 years, the New England League of Middle Schools has been a leader in promoting middle-level best practices by providing collaborative learning experiences that support students' intellectual, academic, social, and emotional growth and success. Our membership includes more than 250 schools from across the 6 New England states.
We're honored to have a group of panelists today who will be exploring how to create connections and support for students in the pivotal middle years through an advisory program. They will share practical examples from their own experiences and tips for building or expanding and improving your own school's advisory program.
Thank you, George. So what is advisory? I have spent a lot of time in many years trying to define advisory. And maybe the best explanation that I've gotten of what is advisory comes from the late Dr. John Lounsbury, well-known legacy leader of the middle school movement. Dr. Lounsbury stated that advisory lacks a clear meaning. When offering an opinion on any aspect of an advisory program, one almost has to preface the statement with, "It all depends." For instance, when considering the basic question, how large should an advisory group be, a response has to note that it all depends. For instance, will the group include students that the advisor teaches? Will the group stay together for more than 1 year? Will they meet daily or twice a month, among other considerations? The stock answer of 12 to 15 advisees in an advisory just can't be universal. It all depends. Also, what is seen as an advantage for one arrangement, such as teaching one of one's advisees, is considered a disadvantage when viewed from a different perspective. It all depends. And as his colleague Jim Burns added in his book, Advisory, Finding the Best Fit for Your School, Mr. Burns stated that advisory is not a curriculum, but a relationship. And although our panelists are all from middle schools, the information they will share could equally apply to high school as well. Before we dive into discussion, I'd like to take a moment to let my colleagues introduce themselves. We'll start with Kathleen.
Good morning, everybody. I am Kathleen Derry. I am an English language arts teacher for 7th and 8th grade at East Lyme Middle School in East Lyme, Connecticut.
Kim.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Hebert. I am the proud principal of the Berkley Middle School in Berkley, Massachusetts. We are a 5 to 8 middle school.
And Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Pollet. I'm the principal at Tyngsborough Middle School in Tyngsborough, Massachusetts. We're a 6 through 8 middle school with about 400 students and 60 to 65 staff members.
So to get our discussion started this morning or today, we're going to go through each of our panelists, and they're going to tell us about the advisory program at their school, and including how often it meets, how many students, how it's set up. And we'll start with Kathleen.
I teach in a 5 through 8 middle school. We have approximately just under 800 students, 750 to 800, depending on the population growth and decline. Currently, our advisory program meets twice a month, and every certified staff member and or related services person has an advisory group. So that includes people like our school counselors, occupational therapist, physical therapist, speech pathologist, and then every certified teacher will have an advisory group. We tend to try to get those groups anywhere between 10 and 12 students. We are also, we developed a program that is appropriate for 5th and 6th graders and 7th and 8th graders, and that program loops for the 2 years. We also try to keep the kids together for 2 years. We are on teams as a middle school. We are grouped by teams. So the students are in advisory groups with teachers that they may have and other teachers they may not have, but we try to keep those groups together for 2 years.
Kim?
Yes, good morning again, everyone. So like I said, we are a very small K-8 district. We have an elementary school and a middle school. Our middle school is 5 through 8 with about 400 students and about 55 staff. This is our second year of advisory. And I think one of the biggest things is that there's no perfect time to start. So just to get started is the best part. We have about 55 staff, as I said, and all of our staff, as Kathleen mentioned, but including our paraprofessionals, have a group. So that includes the superintendent, myself, my assistant principal, the school adjustment counselor, our paraprofessionals. Our groups are grades 5 through 8. So the students, there's about 2 from each grade. So there's about 8 students per group. And our goal is to keep them all 4 years. Obviously, when we started last year, our 8th graders were only with us for a year. But the goal for us right now, as we continue to learn what works best for us, is to keep the kids for the 4 years. We meet once a month. And I think that maybe what you'll hear today is, I wish we could meet every day. I wish our schedule allowed us to meet it once a week, but once a month is what my school could handle at this time from a scheduling standpoint. So we meet once a month for about 35 to 45 minutes. And while we do have a curriculum that's a basis for what we do, I think a lot of what we do is really focus on topics that are relevant to middle school students. And I think we'll have a chance to talk a little bit more about that later, about what those topics are. And for my staff, I think it was most helpful to have something that I was able to give them each month so that that would facilitate the conversation. I think some people might be more comfortable with that relationship building, and others might need those sentence starters or those conversation starters. So we were able to provide that information, and all groups were experiencing the same thing at the same time, which brought our school together from a cultural climate standpoint.
Thanks, Kim. And Chris?
So as I said, we're a school of around 400 students, 6 through 8. We have around 30 advisories. That's our core teachers, our counselor, our special ed teachers, our unified arts teachers all have the advisory. Related services, assistant principal, special ed facilitators, they support the teachers and their advisories. It runs every day from 7:25 to 7:45, which is the beginning of our day. Attendance is taken at 7:25. We do announcements. And we have a variety of activities that we do. We structure it where it's, how's your weekend? Starts our Mondays through checking in on academics if necessary, to playing games, to sharing stories. Some advisories use CNN News or BBC News just to spark some conversation. But this model has changed. We made the recognition as a staff last year as we were looking at what a successful middle school was all about through the book that was just produced by Emily and the book group that we participated in, is that based on the social emotional needs of our kids, we felt that every day was so important to do and to start the day. And what we found is that a number of our students ease into the day a lot more successfully with this advisory going each day. We've done it once a week. We've done it once every 2 weeks. We've done a variety of activities that are together. Our curriculum is suggested activities that come from the Second Step program, that come from things that we have culled through many years. I was saying to this group earlier, if this is probably my 4th iteration of advisory in my time. So what we did was we really did an analysis of our school and our students' needs using the Successful Middle School, which was an annual publication update to their kind of mission and their vision of what middle school should be. that helped us identify that social emotional learning was something that we needed to focus a lot more on. The advisory really has served that purpose. And we do it by grade level. We focus on at the team right now. That being said, we are constantly reviewing and looking at what our model is and what our needs are. We've entertained interest-based advisories. We haven't gotten there yet. We've also introduced multi-level advisories where we would have maybe our 8th graders serving as more of a mentor for the 6th graders, but we haven't gotten there yet. We wanted to really just hit the ground running to start the day and go for that 20 minutes.
Chris, what was the book that you read? There are a couple of people in the chat that are wondering.
So Emily did an update to This We Believe. It's called The Successful Middle School. And we were fortunate with NELMS and Emily to do was it a 5-session book group that we looked at all the pillars of the middle school philosophy programming, and that really sparked the conversation around advisory being an important component. Not that we already had it, but the way it was going to be implemented became that 20 minutes to start our day. And that's also, quite honestly, coming out of the pandemic and the fact that we were dealing with so many different challenges socially and emotionally. I believe to a teacher, we would find that they say that the kids at 7:45 after the 20-minute block are in a better place to, instead of just jumping into your math class right away after announcements, they feel like the kids are, I think, a little better acclimated to the school. So.
And one of the questions that has come up a couple of times, and I'd like to throw it out to the panelists, is how do you select students for your advisor? What method do you use? How do you go about doing that? Kim, do you want to start?
Sure, I'd be happy to. For our purposes, we started by just a random selection with a little caveat. Obviously, for the kiddos that we have here, we get to know them really well. So I think that there were some relationships that had already formed in where we were starting last year. We may have purposely, put a student with a particular adult that we thought would help make that relationship successful. And I've seen some great questions. I think the point is, for us in our thinking, was to have students have another adult in the building that was a contact for them, a connection, a relationship that has nothing to do with grading or the office or that piece. So they may not ever have had them in the classroom, or if it's the role of like the superintendent or myself, to see us in a different way. So I think that we randomly selected, and then we certainly would make adjustments if necessary, but I think we haven't had to in the last 2 years, and that's been a really positive thing for us.
Anyone else? Kathleen or Chris, do you want to jump in on that question, how you actually select the students that go into each advisory group?
So we also randomize it as best we can, but those lists are also shared with the advisors, with the counselors, just to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all the kids. And then we do try to stay with the same group of kids for 2 years. And we have found that to be incredibly successful. It helps to build that community that you would like to have in an advisory setting. So it has been pretty successful, and certainly we have new students come in and we have students leave, so we have to make those adjustments as well. We at one point in time were thinking it would be great to group students by interest. It did seem a little overwhelming to do that, I'll be honest, but it certainly is a goal that someday we might try again.
Yeah, we randomize as well. We actually start alphabetically, to be honest with you, this year, and then we looked at the combinations. We talked about doing it across both. So we have 2 teams at each grade level, 5-person, 3-person team at each level. And we looked at going across grade level. At the same time, we wanted to really just be tighter with our groups. Kim brings up a great point about the role that the advisor takes with the students, that there is no grade affiliated with it. That is, in our case, it's truly a conversation or an activity. And it's more of a laid back, relaxed setting, no heavy lifting per se. And that allows that, I think it allows the advisees in those advisories to craft maybe a little different relationship with their teacher. And in some cases, they don't have that teacher. It might be unified arts teacher. They don't have first try with us. So that allows that relationship to flourish. And it truly is that advocate for kids. And it's not the role of a counselor. I saw that question a lot. We don't play the role of a counselor, but if we make identifications where students had a particularly difficult weekend or a tough night or is really struggling, we're going to kind of bookmark that, let someone know who can follow up with that student. And that really helps us identify some of the challenges that kids are having in a much more relaxed way than we have in the past. And I think that has served well. We're running 10 to 12 kids per advisory, and it really, as was said earlier, just the fact that the groups vary in size, but based on population. Our 6th grade advisories are a little larger than our 8th grade advisories, just by the nature of the class size.
So to each of you, how much contact do advisors, or do your advisors have direct contact with parents, or is there a responsibility or their participation in parent-teacher conferences?
I can start with that question if you don't mind. One of the practices that we have instituted is that at the beginning of the year, each advisor makes a phone call home to each parent just to introduce ourselves and to talk a little bit about what their child will be experiencing and participating in during that advisory block. And it's more just to build those relationships. And I know the administrators have received just incredible feedback from parents, because as we know, once they climb the ladder of school, it seems like in elementary school, parents are super involved, and then that involvement starts to wane a little bit when they get to middle school, and then of course in high school. And so this has been a way for parents to feel like somebody at the middle school cares about their child, and also just that outreach, put a face, name with a face, and just a nice friendly conversation. And certainly at the beginning of the year, it's great to get to hear from parents, and sometimes you learn things that you may not have known if you hadn't made that phone call. So that's a really great thing to do to start the advisory program off.
Kathleen, I love that. Actually, we had not done that. So like it was discussed before, we certainly use our other tools throughout the year, and we'll do a social emotional screening 3 times a year where families, students, and the teachers answer some questions so that we can ensure that we are identifying our students who either feel at risk themselves or who their teachers feel that they might be at risk, or certainly if a family feels that way and hasn't found another way to communicate with us. So we hadn't had our advisors reaching out to their group of 8 students, or their families, I should say. But I do love that. So we're learning from one another as well. What I do love is that the advisors throughout even though we only get to meet once a month, they've developed ways to communicate with their group. So they'll send them, they've jotted down their birthdays, and they'll send them an email wishing them a happy birthday. They will put a little sticky note on their locker that tells them to have a great day. We use a lot of Google Classroom. So some of the advisors have created a Google Classroom for their group of 8 students, and will post poems or inspirational things for their group. So this goes back to having that other adult that is someone that students can connect with in a really easy way about anything that might be going on with them. And then certainly we support those advisors to only take it to a level in which they feel comfortable, and then that if they were worried or concerned about a student, would at least be able to bring them to one of us to take it to the next level. So I think they're doing a really great job of connecting with their groups beyond the one time a month that we get to meet. And food is always, a motivator. So sometimes they, provide snacks, as long as it's been approved by the food policy and the nurse.
Kim, I think you mentioned that the students stay in the same advisory for all 4 years that they're in school. One of the questions that came up is, what happens if cliques are being formed? Is there room to switch? How do you identify if changes can be made?
So we're into year 2. And so it hasn't come up yet. I think that there have been some, I shouldn't say it hasn't come up yet. So there have been some opportunities for us to make a better fit. I think that we all, don't have to get along at the same level. So we may have made a few shifts there. But what I find the interesting dynamic is, and it's been a really beautiful thing to watch, 5th graders and 8th graders together in this setting. Our 5th graders at one point were giving advice to the 8th graders last year about what they should think about as they headed off to high school. They had some great thoughts. And I think that the benefit of having 5th graders in a middle school, that 10-year-old and then that 14-year-old, they probably change more in those 4 years than they do any other time, collectively in their lives. So they're much more willing to share their thoughts. And the 8th graders I've found have been really kind and, helping kids navigate how do you, if you don't make a team, how do you deal with how that feels? Have you tolerate those uncomfortable feelings? So for the most part, those relationships have been a really positive thing. But certainly we have moved a few students that it was in their best interest to either be in a different group based on the dynamic of the peers in the group.
Now, to each of you, do you do academic counseling and check-ins with the advisors, with their advisees? Kathleen?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Sure, no, that's okay. So we have in the past used Naviance to have our students create academic goals, and then the advisors would then check in on those academic goals. That did seem to sometimes take on a life of its own. So right now, our advisory at the middle school level is truly to foster a sense of belonging and to check in on their social emotional, well-being, and using, we were talking ahead of time, creating lessons and activities around the CASEL competencies just for social emotional learning. So we as an advisory group have kind of gotten away from checking in on their academics, although it typically comes up because most of us now start every advisory session with what we call our highs and lows, where students and teachers alike share the best part of their week and the worst part of their week. And it's been a game changer for every teacher who is now utilizing that technique. It has been a game changer for their advisory in terms of building community and building connections and having kids who normally wouldn't talk to each other support each other through their highs and lows. They may start out really simplistic, but now with my group of 8th graders last week, I could not believe how honest and caring they were with each other. And none of these children would necessarily call each other friends outside of this group. So it can be very powerful. So like I said, we have kind of gotten away a little bit from the advisory part, the academic advisory part of that.
I think we do more of a check-in periodically. We also have a what I need block in our school day, short what I need block. So that tends to be the focus of the academic kind of advising piece. But there are advisors who will have quick conversations, have kids check their power school to see where they're at. I think students in our school on a more increasing basis have been more vigilant about their own academic advising, though we touch upon it. But it's more of, to Kathleen's point, it's more of a cultural supportive place. And you're right, the combinations of students that we have really bring about some different relationships than we've seen in just under natural, whatever those are, circumstances. So I think that and again, by us putting it at the beginning of our day, it really is to ease students in, to do a quick check-in, to be able to redirect if we need to get some supports there after the fact, but it really isn't totally geared toward academic advising and kids getting hit at 725. How you doing with your grades? Check out your power school, all that. Yeah, that's not the conversation they're really looking to have. So
maybe we can go around and ask each of you to talk about your advisory program, what it is and how it was created. And maybe Chris, do you want to start off?
Sure. I think our advisory program has had and I've been in this school for just over 6 years now. kind of had 3 different iterations. We started with it started with a program analysis and schedule change that this occurred 5 years ago. And it was, as Kathleen said, it was a group of teachers with a couple of our administrators really kind of guiding the conversation, going back to our teams as to what we valued, what we saw as important in our overall program and in our social emotional learning component. So advisory kind of came to light then. And then assisted by our student council, we went through a mission vision kind of review a couple of years later, and to a person, a look at our advisory and the best way to implement our advisory was another focus at that time. So that's when we went to the 1 day a week in the midst of our win block model. And then this past year, as I described earlier, with the analysis of the successful middle school and just coming out of the pandemic, we went to the model we're operating from now. All along the way, those groups have culled activities for the general staff to use in their advisories, whether they want to or not. We have found that offering resources, but allowing teachers some individuality with advisory is really important. That you don't want, in our building, there are going to be topics that we're going to hit. There are going to be days where we're all going to be exactly on the same page based on the need. But more often than not, we want those relationships to kind of be created organically and allow for some individuality. We'll also, as I said earlier, offer some support. We have some great resources in our related services, our counseling staff, our, administrative staff to get in there and help model what are good activities to do. And we just did a share the best activities resources that we did through a Google form where people could put things in there to say, hey, I tried this, it worked out well. And that's been a really beneficial component. Plus, it takes a role in our faculty meetings as well. We'll revisit the conversation periodically, what's working, what's not working.
That's a great idea, Chris. Thanks for sharing that. Kathleen, you mentioned Castle. I'm wondering if there are other resources or other structures that you use in your advisory program.
In the second iteration of our advisory program, over the last 14 years, we're using the Castle framework to create activities for our advisories. Again, like I said, we have activities for 5th and 6th grade teachers, and then activities for 7th and 8th grade teachers. These are all posted on a school website. And on that website, we always list the essential question for the month, and it would be related to either self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. So we will have that essential question. We then give the advisors the opportunity, as Chris was saying, we want them to individualize it, but we also want to make sure that certain skills are being discussed and certain skills are being practiced. So at the end of each advisory, we now, in order to help kind of collect some data and also to give students another chance to voice concerns, there are exit slips posted on our Google Classroom pages for each of our advisories. And at the end of the advisory, we give the kids about 5 minutes to answer some questions on an exit slip. And those exit slips then are seen by our school counselors, who will then give information back to the advisors. So that's been a really neat way to see what kids are learning and what questions they still have. So a group of teachers actually has created all of the activities and essential questions and the web page. So this is really teacher driven, obviously with supportive administration. There are about 10 of us right now on the advisory committee. And I think we're all very passionate about connecting with kids. And so we have found that having these resources for our teachers helps with buy-in. And we also have found that the more that we get feedback from them about what's working, what's not working, we ask the kids what's working, what's not working. So we're constantly revising and changing, and we have the supportive administration to do that. We are not a canned program. This is certainly special to our community. And we use, I've seen a lot of the resources that are being suggested in the chat, and we've probably taken from all of those resources. I remember starting just with the Castle, going to the Castle website, and from there, they send you out to a bunch of free resources. So there was a lot of work going into this program. It didn't just happen overnight. And we actually, with the second iteration, I believe we met 4 times that year and really just took it 2 months at a time, because we didn't, it's a lot, and we want it to be valuable, and we wanted there to be variety and choice for both students and teachers, so that they could, create an advisory that works for them.
Chris, one of the questions, thank you, Kathleen. Chris, one of the questions that came up was, what is the difference between the what I need block and advisory?
So we've started to really go into the MTSS model this year. The win block in the past had been really just an RTI model where we were doing interventions, extensions, and some activities. So the win block now is taking a more holistic approach. We're doing a lot of work. Even today, while I'm with you all, my staff is going to be looking at that block and how effectively to use it with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. It's about a half an hour, more academic focus. Though there's an opportunity there to do social emotional groups if necessary. We really wanted to focus our energy on the advisory program being our initial SEL supports. And teachers have been able to do a great deal of SEL in their classroom, but the focus of the advisory to start the day really has made a difference, just to kind of do that emotional check-in with kids and talk about some topics that allow them to kind of self-evaluate and be able to advocate for themselves a lot more. So that's, essentially the difference. The win block has kind of taken on it's definitely a more academic focus and a more skill-based focus.
Great. Kim, do you want anything to add to that?
Sure. So I think one of the things is, and I love the team approach. We're a very small school. I am the full-time principal and the full-time guidance counselor. I do have a school adjustment counselor who I'm very thankful for. But I do feel like having a committee that can look at this and include students. So we try to include our students as often as possible to get their feedback, because without them, the groups would just be, us as the adults talking. The other thing is, from a perspective of where I plan staff meetings and I plan the common planning time, or I attend the common planning time, and I'm trying to help plan the advisory groups to ensure that people have a plate from which to choose from, to try to tie all those in. So we have what we had developed with our students called the vision of the graduate. So skills that we wanted our students to have before they graduated from middle school. And for us, we took our acronym of, our mascot is the Eagles. And so the things that we're focusing on as a school community are things like equity, acceptance, gratitude, leadership, effort, and self-advocacy. And then our core values, which I'm sure every school has, of respect, responsibility, optimism, and kindness. So with those topics, I tried to create an opportunity where at the staff meetings, we were focused on the same skill or the same vision of the graduate that we would be focusing on in our advisory groups, we call them our PALs, so the positive action leadership groups. I think we can call them anything we want. I think we're trying to get kids to think about their thoughts and their feelings and their actions are all connected. And that if we focus on the value of those and coming at it from a positive place, that they would start to feel better about their choices, their life's experiences, and their opportunities. Because I think for a lot of our kiddos, we want them to just see that there are positive opportunities within your day, and we're here to help you discover those. So I think having a clear vision from the district, so whether that's your school council goals or your school's district goals, or even the teachers' goals as part of the evaluation tool. A lot of our teachers took the advisory and created that as a professional practice goal, so that nothing is done in isolation. I think if we're able to, our teachers have a lot that we are asking of them and are responsible for. And so if we make it that it's a natural part of that day or that experience, then people feel like the planning that goes into it is covering a lot of areas. And so nothing is should be done in isolation. So just some thoughts on that.
So to the three of you, what advice would you give to a school that wants to start an advisory program? And what are some of the pitfalls to avoid when you're doing that?
I think it's important to make sure that the staff is engaged in the conversation from the get-go, that it kind of models that shared leadership, you know, and also lead learner from the principal's office, that you have to employ that. Because if it's a top-down initiative, because we're going to address this topic or whatever, it's not going to be successful. And then I think there has to be just consistent follow-through on topics. So once you arrive at the model you want to operate from and under the direction you want it to go and what it's to support, it's the job of all of us to monitor that each of us is playing that role that we need to play, that it's as consistent as possible. And again, your styles are going to be different, but I think we have to make sure that if our vision, our goal, or whatever on this program is clearly identified, are we revisiting that? Are we having conversation about that? Are we making sure that the experiences are more similar than they are different, in that you're getting that emotional support, or you're getting whatever your program's goal is. And I think you have to be consistent with the conversation. You can't drop it off, even if it's a 5-minute check-in, or at the team level, or at the building level, or whatever, without having it in the topics of faculty meetings or team meetings. You're gonna lose the momentum. You're gonna lose the energy and the support from your staff. I think that's the pitfall that I've run into. When it doesn't become a conversation piece on a regular basis, it loses its momentum.
So one way that we, I think, have been able to get more staff buy-in is that we definitely have activities and exit slips, and everything is prepared for them. And then the other way is that our administrators, we in our district, we have faculty, not a faculty meeting, we call it professional development every Wednesday for an hour, or before or after school, depending on the school that you are in. All teachers, it's part of our contract. And our building administrators allow each team to meet about what is the next advisory topic, and talk through some potential lessons, some things, so just giving time to plan, because that's kind of a pitfall. I don't have time to plan. I can't do this. I can't find the activity. So now it's all in one place, but now you have a chance to discuss. So that's really been helpful. And I always say, go back to the kids. When we ask the kids what's working, what's not, we get our best advice. And I did that before this panel. And one of the things that came out from one of my 8th graders that I really appreciated, he was not in my advisory last year. He was in another advisory, and he talked a lot about when you walk into the room, you want to know that this is not math classes, this is not science classes, this is not social studies or language arts or PE or whatever it is. This is a different feel. And he said that the best thing a teacher can do is take a deep breath and get excited for his or her advisees. And I took that as a compliment, because I think he was saying that I was doing that, but I also think that's a great message for all teachers, and that will be shared at our next faculty meeting, that the kids are watching us and they take our lead. And if we're excited about it, they will be excited about it. So that's, and I know that's hard, because not everybody's comfortable in those situations. But if you have the materials and you have the goal, and they know what the goal is, and we're united in that shared value, then I think it can be a successful thing.
One of the things that we found that worked, always the fear is that on the day of the advisory, again, where we have it once a month, a staff member will be out, and then a sub's coming in, but the sub is not really that connected person necessarily for the kids. So part of what we wanted to do is make sure that staff was comfortable, especially where we have adults who have a different background, have a different professional background. So the paraprofessionals who do an amazing job and have an amazing relationship with kids, which is why they were such a great resource for us to have them working with kids, in addition to the school nurse and our teachers and our administration, but to having them pair up together. So although the goal is to keep the group small, in a physical classroom, we people were meeting, because again, I'm sure space is at a premium in most buildings like it is in ours. So the paraprofessionals don't have their own classroom. And so allowing two groups to join, and within the setting, they could still have their own session, but that there was that other adult support person in the room. And then therefore, if a particular person was out that day, you had a common factor in the room to support the advisory and to keep it going. So that was just something that for us worked well. People felt more confident. And then again, as time moves on, we're hoping that the idea of this group becomes more of that relaxed, we're just here to all take a break. We're also scheduled, we're running on bells, we're running on time frames, we're running out of minutes, we have to write in the agenda book, we have to get, to the homework, to class, that this is that opportunity for us to all take a breath and let the conversation lead itself. And the more we can have adults feel comfortable with that, knowing that no matter where the conversation goes, they don't have to be the end all be all. They're not the investigator of the situation, but if the child feels comfortable enough to share something with you, then all you need to do is be that listening piece, and then know the right person to get them to, because you were the right person to start. So we felt like that combination of allowing people to pair up has definitely been a positive thing for us.
And we have also identified 5 staff members, like I said, certified and or related services, who are specifically substitutes for advisory, because we meet twice a month for 30 minutes. If there are always teachers out on those days. Yeah. So they then get put into a different advisory group, and that's been really helpful. So they don't have their own advisory group, but we identified people who are super flexible, who can work with lots of kids on a moment's notice. And it's really, that has been hugely, hugely helpful for when teachers are out. So
that's a great piece of advice. Thank you so much.
I just want to jump in and respond to a question in the Q&A about high school advisory. And I was a high school principal for 21 years, started advisory in 3 of my schools. And I have to say that the information that you're sharing with us today is just as applicable to high school advisories as it is to middle school advisories. So I hope that any of the folks out there listening today who are high school people can see how they can relate this information to what they do in their high school advisories. But I want to bring up a question that I hear a lot about advisory, and that's about resistance. How do you get buy-in for both your teachers and your students? And when there is resistance, how do you deal with that resistance? Kim, do you want to start?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I'd love to say that there's no resistance. Anything we talk about here in Berkeley is a golden idea. I think that what, Kathleen and Chris were talking about, and I probably, again, only being 2 years in, can continue to do a better job with, is to continue those conversations and to use, so we have common planning time with each grade level team once in a 6-day cycle, and taking an opportunity to really talk about our teachers definitely are worried about our kiddos in general, that how stressed they are, the anxiety level that we're seeing, trying to be everything they can be for a student based on what they need, and still identify and meet the needs of those students who are working at or above grade level. We have all of these scaffolded things in a 57-minute period. And so I think that using those conversations to say, here's another opportunity for us to not feel helpless. So we have this time with them, beyond that 8 to 2:30, we still need to affect positive change, but we don't have as much control over what happens to our kiddos, but that relationship exists before 8 and after 2:30. So the more we can build healthy relationships, and the more healthy relationships we can provide for students, then that 8 to 2:30 time kind of naturally grows, and they might be willing to come in the next day and share with us, or send us an email, or respond to an email that we've had. So we have to use, I think, the tools we have, because the time isn't going to get any bigger with them, but their needs for us to be available to them are bigger. And I think for us, we constantly need to be mindful of making sure that our teachers and our staff feel like they have a balanced life. I don't expect that our staff is responding to kiddos at 10 o'clock at night. And there's that balance of they feel responsible like they need to, but if we don't build in opportunities for them to have a good, healthy work-life balance, then they're not the best versions of themselves. So I think it's just really important for that resistance students, middle school kiddos, always want to have a say, always want to be heard. So if you build in that time, even if not, everything that they want to share with us isn't always positive, if they're willing to say it, then there's something else to it, because no kid really doesn't want to feel connected to another human being, or have some human being care that they're just walking in the room and that we're happy to see them. So if they're resistant, I think it's our opportunity, our ability to get to where that resistance is really coming from, because it's not about getting out of class. It's not about having to sit in this room with this one person. It's usually about something else. So that's kind of an opportunity to learn more about a kiddo.
Chris, Kathleen, do you have anything to add?
I would just say, whenever you can, design the program, whatever program you design, keep the activities interactive, keep them high energy. That typically engages kids more, and it also engages your staff, and give staff an opportunity to have input and tell you what's working, what's not working. Buddy systems. I think most people are in education for the right reasons, right? And we're educators for the right reasons. And so just call on those deep-seated, beliefs that you have about education, and advisory will become more natural and more comfortable for you. The other thing we have had happen is we've had newer teachers, or teachers who are a little less comfortable, come in and observe, and a teacher who's really comfortable running an advisory. And I think they've picked up some tricks and some tips on how to do that. And that has been very, very successful. So
I'm going to piggyback off that idea, Kathleen, because that's exactly what we have some really talented people who do not have advisories, that when we recognize that Jeff or George is struggling with an advisor, not that Jeff or George ever would, but if they did, we would get that person in there to kind of help model some of the activities. And then, quite honestly, the expectation for me is, as I'm walking around, which I try to do every day, and at least check in with 5 or 6 advisories to see what the activities are that people are doing, to say, I saw you working with this person. Have you been able to employ that? But it goes back to the origin. If we all are part of the conversation, we all recognize the need for what our core values are with advisory, that when Jeff or George is struggling, I'm going to have a conversation and say, we all agreed upon this, or we were all aware of this. You had your opportunities. This may not be the most comfortable situation for you, but how can we help you? And it is a supportive conversation. But in the end, we all agreed to this point. We're all going in this direction. This is valued and important for our kids in our school. How can we do this? And I think that's really important, though some of those conversations have to happen. And it doesn't have to be that so pointed. It can be more supportive initially, but then it may get to the point where this is something that the school values and it's important to do.
Hey, George, I just want to add I was a principal at 3 different middle schools, and in one of the middle schools, we were so committed to our advisory program and building relationships that it was actually, when we were interviewing candidates to teach in our school, didn't make any difference what the content was, that advisory and building relationships was an important piece that we would bring up during our interviews.
Yeah, we did the same thing. I think, it's an important part of the total package that your school is offering to students. And we all know how important building the relationships are. Yeah. We're almost out of time, but I do want to take an opportunity to let everyone kind of offer some parting thoughts, or maybe offer the thing that you love the most about your advisory. So I'm gonna put Jeff on the spot here because I know he's a veteran of advisories in the schools where he's been. And maybe we can start out by asking Jeff what his thoughts are about, great advice or favorite thing about advisory.
It's a good question. I think it is, obviously, we consider schools, that reading, writing, math, history, health, wellness, art, music. But advisory is as important as any of those subjects. And I think it's key to have them in schools. And I believe my favorite part of advisory was just having that interaction with students, getting to know students. And I would hope as important was them getting to know me, who I was, and that I was there to support them.
That's great. Thanks, Jeff. Chris, do you want to go next?
I think Jeff hit upon the essential piece for me, is that it's that relationship, that there's no stress in the relationship that you should be creating in advisory, that it should be the connection. And these are going to be the teachers that kids most remember down the road, to allow for their access, their entry into school as comfortably as possible. And that's so essential. I love hearing noise during advisory. I love the games. I love the fun. We actually have people playing water pong in one of our advisories as a reward. So and anyone can win. I mean, so there's the competitive, but there's also the supportive, and kids, to what we were saying earlier, some of the relationships that come out of that advisory that never would have happened under quote unquote normal circumstances. I think those are the most valuable components of advisory. And just, again, hearing the fun and the noise every morning, even when they're half asleep, because we know half our kids are, that gets them going in such a positive way. So.
So
Kathleen?
I guess I agree. The laughter, the fun, the excitement, and I love that that sense of community they feel and the support that they feel among their peers. I just think that that's an invaluable life lesson for them to learn, that they are not alone, that there is somebody willing to listen, and you get what you put into it. That's that's everything in life, right? You get what you put into it. I can't imagine my middle school career without advisory. It's something I look forward to every week. It's not something I roll my eyes at, and I'm actually excited for the break, for me too, personally, for me too. As an English language arts teacher, I need that break as well. And so, yeah, that's my parting words.
Thanks, Kathleen. Kim?
Yeah, I think, and this is something as certainly a takeaway for me, is to really continue to have those conversations, because it isn't something that if the adults are going into in a stressful manner, that the kids then are feeling that this is one more thing that we need to do in a day. Where as opposed to, if we could really look at it as this is the one thing in our day that will set the tone for the rest of the day, and really give ourselves a chance to be reminded about the joy, finding that joy in what we do. Kids have to be here. This is a choice for us. And regardless of how we've made the choice or why we've made the choice, to remember that this is a choice, and to choose joy is an opportunity to give kids a chance to feel that joy. But I think it's that conversation that you need to keep having, because we all get caught up in having to do one more thing, as opposed to that this is a gift we can also give ourselves in that break in the day, whether it's once a day, once a week, once a month. So I definitely think, and the piece that Chris mentioned is it's not set in stone. So it is fluid, it is constantly evolving, constantly changing, and be willing to change with it. Because I think out of that, I'm going to go back and change a few things before our next advisory group, thanks to all of you. So I hope that that's helpful to people.
What a great sentiment too, that advisory should be joyful, right? It shouldn't be a chore. It should be a joy. And I'll put myself on the spot. I think one of the favorite things that I experienced when I was an advisor in my school, as principal of the school, was some of the activities that we did. And they all came from the students and from the teachers. I think one of the highlights of the year was always the pumpkin decorating contest that we had, where advisories would all decorate a pumpkin, and just those kinds of activities. Again, they're very joyful, they're very active, they bring people together. It's just what, in my mind, advisory is all about. Well, that's going to wrap up our hour today. And on behalf of everyone at NEASC and NELMS, I'd like to thank our panelists once again for all of the thoughts and experiences and comments that you've had to share with us. I want to thank Jeff and our friends at NELMS for joining us in this partnership for this webinar today. Just from the response that we received, it is a great success. So once again, on behalf of NELMS and NEASC, I want to thank everyone who attended today. We look forward to seeing you at one of our future professional learning events. Thank you, everyone.